So Anova correlation or chi-square, we're going to figure out how to tell which one of these you need. And if you need an Anova, this is the video you need to watch to run an Anova in SPSS. So we'll begin with the research question and state the research hypothesis. And what we know is that this person is looking for differences in social support between two groups, Native Americans who do not and do have diabetes. So now we're over in the variable view, looking for our variables. And what it looks like is that there's a variable called social emotional support and one called self-diabetes. I think those are the two variables we need. If you guys need help finding your particular variables from these variable names, let me know. Just email me and I'll send you the name of your variables. Also, if your background information is different or uses a different variable than you see now that you have to use the one that is associated with your background information. Don't redo your background information. Find the variable that you need in this variable list. So go back down there and go to data view now so that we can look at these variables and see what kind of numbers they are, whether they're qualitative or quantitative numbers. We can see from looking at self-diabetes that it must be a qualitative variable because lots of people scored 0, lots scored 1, a few scored 2. We have to figure that out. It's probably, do you have diabetes, yes or no? And then social emotional support, that looks more like a quantitative variable with several different levels. I can see it ranging between 2 and 5 just on the screen, and it probably ranges at least between 1 and 5. So let's call that a quantitative variable, an ordinal variable. So we see that self-diabetes had values of 0, 1, or 2, and we saw that in the data sheet as well. But we see also that 2 means they don't know whether they have been diagnosed with diabetes or not, and we'd like to eliminate those people. So over there in the missing column, the next column where it says none for missing, we want to indicate that anybody who scores a 2, we're going to consider them missing values. And in order to change that none to a 2, we just click on that cell and say we have a discrete missing value and add 2 in there as the missing value. So let's find out how we asked the question or got the information about social and emotional support. In order to do that, you go to variable labels and in the variable view, and you scroll down to where you find how often do you get the social and emotional support you need. So that item was assessed, or that variable was assessed with just that one item. We can also see that the scores range between 1 and 5. When we click on the value tab, the scores range between 1 and 5, 1 being I never get the amount of social and emotional support I need, versus 5, I always get the amount. So that's what's called an ordinal variable. It's ordered. And that's our dependent variable, and we can call that a quantitative variable. Those numbers matter. The ordering of those numbers matter. And if we have a qualitative IV, diabetes status, yes, you do have diabetes, no, you don't have diabetes, and a quantitative DV, social emotional support with multiple levels, then that needs to be analyzed with Anova. So this survey was administered to Deep South participants and only those participants who self-identified as Native Americans. Again, it was administered as a part of a needs assessment concerning healthy ways with lots of other variables assessed. But the variables we used in this study were diabetes status and the extent to which participants reported general social emotional support. Social emotional support, give an example. Tell them what that item looked like and how it was measured. What was the scale? In order to test the null that the two population means for the two groups of Native Americans, those with and without diabetes, is the same, we need to go to Analyze, Compare Means, One-Way Anova. We find our variables in the variable list. The dependent variable is how often do you get the social and emotional support you need. The independent variable is has a doctor or nurse identified you as having diabetes. The independent variable is also called a factor. And we also need the two sample means that go with each of the two groups of people with and without diabetes. And so if we click on options, one of the options we have is to get descriptive information. Click on that as well and hit OK. Okay, so this is the output from SPSS. We have Anova results, and what we see is that F on 1 and 174 degrees of freedom is equal to 1.91, and that sig value, p-value, is not less than alpha, so we failed to reject the null hypothesis. It also printed out the means, the mean of 3.6 and the mean for the people who do have diabetes, 3.3, they're not significantly different. They're different, but they're not so different that we would expect their population means to be different. So we started with a research question. Is social emotional support different for Native Americans from the Deep South who have versus those who do not have diabetes? We stated the research hypothesis that there are differences between those two groups. We tested the null. We got an F on 1 and 174 degrees of freedom equal to 1.91, and that was not a significant result. So we failed to reject the null, and our conclusion is there are no significant differences on social emotional support between Deep South Native Americans who have versus do not have diabetes. So your results section would say something like this. In order to determine whether social emotional support differed for Deep South Native Americans with, and put your mean and standard deviation right there, versus without diabetes, Anova was computed with diabetes status as the IV and social emotional support as the DV. Anova results indicated no significant difference on social emotional support as a function of diabetes status, and indicate what your F value and P value was. And add it on to what we've already done in our already designed poster. We have a rough draft of our introduction. We have tables already designed. In our conclusions section, we can talk about why these findings are important. What does that mean for intervention studies in the Deep South if people with and without diabetes do not have differences in social support? We may want to look at particular forms of social support as a follow-up, and that would go into the conclusions section. Also, what goes in conclusions is limitations of this study. So we only looked at Native Americans from the Deep South. Maybe we should broaden our scope, because what we find out doesn't apply to Native Americans anywhere else or to any other groups of people, or potentially it could not. Make sure to look at those example posters and see how they handle conclusions, how they handled abstract. The abstract is going to be a couple of sentences about the entire study. I was looking for this, I found this. It's important because of this. Look at all those posters. You have about 15 posters to look at to get some ideas about how you can handle these different sections. So remember, on the first day of class, we learned about soft skills and hard skills that companies need most in order to be successful. And we talked about how this project was a project in collaboration. and adaptability. I mean, we're all being adaptable by adapting to this COVID environment. And persuasion and creativity. The design of the poster is an exercise in creativity. And we talked about hard skills like analytical reasoning. Every aspect of this poster is an exercise in analytical reading. So we are, through this poster, through your presentation as well. Your presentation of this poster is an exercise in persuasion. Convince us that this is an important topic. It needs to be studied. And by the way, it can make a difference in health disparities. We're learning about how to apply stats to the real world, to any job you'll ever have. These soft skills apply to all your jobs. These hard skills, they want you to be able to reason analytically. These are all exercises in what you're going to need in whatever job you take in your life.